Hello and welcome to another edition of Local Heroes, brought to you by WKFK TV7 in Pascagoula and the GI Museum in Gaucher. We're not in the GI Museum in Gaucher, we're at the Gulf Coast Military Collectors Association Military Show here in D'Iberville, and now we're talking to Mr. Alfred Koval. Mr. Koval was a pilot in the 8th Air Force in World War II, flew B-17s. Mr. Koval, welcome to the TV show.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us how you got started in the Army Air Corps?
Oh, yes. I was at home in 1941, and my neighbor, John Sadisher, came over and said, "Hey, Fred, I want to join the Army, Army Air Corps." I said, "That's fine." He said, "But I don't have any transportation. I got to go to the Armory." This is in Erie, Pennsylvania. "How about taking me?" I had a 1930 Ford little Roadster, they called it. I said, "Well, if you want me to, yeah." So I drove him over to 6th Street, which is where the Armory is today, I think. And while he was in there, I was sitting outside, and it was kind of cool. So I went in to see what was going on in the Armory, and this sergeant looked at me when I walked in, and he said, "Are you going to take the physical?" I said, "No, I'm just taking this fellow Sadisher over here. He wants to go." He said, "Why don't you come?" I said, "I hadn't thought about it. I just came to bring him." He said, "Look, this is a physical they give you, and it's absolutely free. You don't have to pay a penny. You'll find out whether you're healthy or not." I said, "Well, that's pretty good." He said, "Yeah, won't cost you a penny." I said, "Well, if that's the way you want it, okay, it sounds good." So I took off my clothes and had a physical. And when it was finished, there were about 20 men in the Armory taking a physical. This might be hard for you to believe. Of the 20 men that took the physical, including me, 3 of us passed. I passed, Sadisher passed. I think the other man was named Harris or Harrison or something like that. 3 of us passed out of the 20. When they told us that, I said to the doctor, I said, "This is impossible." I said, "3 of us?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Look at that man there across the way there. He looks big enough to pick up the building. What are you talking about?" He said, "Oh, yes. He's strong, but he can't see across the room."
Uh-oh.
I said, "Uh-oh. Well, that cancels that." Anyway, they told us, "Okay, you can go home now." We had given them our names and all. And we went home, and I would say a month or 2 later, I got a letter. I lived on East 8th Street in Erie, Pennsylvania. I got a letter that said, "You have to come to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to take a test." I said, "Good grief, how'd that happen, Sadisher came running across the street. He said, "Hey, Fred, I got to go to Pittsburgh to take a test." I said, "Wow, I got a letter too, He said, "Well, when are we going?" I said, "Well, it says here that we have to go at such and such a time." And I said, "But I don't understand what's going on here. All I did was take a physical." Anyway, he said, "Oh, come on, let's go." So the day we were supposed to report in, we left the day before and stayed at the YMCA in Pittsburgh. That next day, when we came into the post office in Pittsburgh, they told us to go down the staircase into the cellar. Now this is what happened. They had a classroom there. And there were, I don't know, about 15 men like myself. And we sat down in the seats with a table in front of us. And this gentleman said to us, "You're going to take this written test. And the reason that you're taking the written test is because none of you are college students. And because you're not a college student, you can't become an officer in the Army Air Corps unless you have 2 years of college." These are the Army regulations at today. And we listened, and he said, in order to give you a chance, we're going to give you a test which is equivalent to 2 years of college. And they showed us the book. It was about 1/4 of an inch thick, big brown book that they gave each one of us, and the paperwork was all full of all kind of chemistry, physics, music, anything you could think of was in that book, geometry, English. Nevertheless, we all took the test. I finished. Now, we started the test about 8 o'clock in the morning. I finished at maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I finally got bored with the thing. I finished it up and turned it in. And one of the men said, "Now you have to go up on the mezzanine in the post office, where they will tell you whether you passed or failed." I said, "Well, okay." So I went upstairs and stood on that mezzanine there, or sat down, and finally this major came out and called me into his office, and he said, "Your name Koval?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "All right, you've passed. You're going into the Army." I said, "But I just got out of high school 3 months ago. What are you talking about?" He says, "You made in 93. You're going into the Army."
Where did you go from there? Did you go to pilot training somewhere?
I told you where I went.
We went to Maxwell Field.
Alabama. It was a beautiful place. But when I got on that train in Erie, and the transportation took us to Montgomery, Alabama, the train went through Montgomery and onto the air base in Maxwell Field. We got off the train between some supply buildings.
Uh-huh.
And they made us take off our civilian clothes, and I mean all of them. And we walked into this one supply building, and they gave us the underwear, the shoes, the uniforms, everything, so that when we came out the door, we were cadets.
You weren't civilians anymore.
Aviation cadets. Huh?
You weren't civilians anymore.
No. That was a shock, But John failed the test. He was so miserable because he said, in fact, he was so angry he joined the Navy.
Ah. So you went from Maxwell Field to a place in Tennessee to learn how to fly?
Jackson, Tennessee.
Jackson, Tennessee.
Stearman's.
You were flying PT-17s.
Yep. And when we got, I don't remember, 50 or 60 hours of flying time, and we graduated from primary flying school, and we went to basic training in Greenville, Mississippi.
And what did you fly in Greenville, Mississippi?
BT-13.
Okay.
Basic training. A low wing, gear down airplane, two-seater. And it had a cover over it for a change, you know. And flew there for a couple of months when we got our 60 hours or so in. And we, I guess you call it, graduated, and we went to the last of the school, the final flying. And they sent me to a place that apparently doesn't exist at all anymore. It was in Lawrenceville, Illinois. And we learned to fly AT-9s and AT-10s.
Which was a multi-engine airplane.
A little airplane with two engines, yeah. And I graduated from that after a couple of months. And then they sent me to, I got orders on my own from that. None of the students, we were all through. I now became a second lieutenant when I graduated from the last school.
Mr. Koval, we're going to have to stop you right there because we're going to have to take a short commercial break. We'll be back with more local heroes here on WKFK TV 7. Don't go away. Welcome back to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV 7. We're talking to Mr. Alfred Koval. Mr. Koval was a B-17 pilot in the 8th Air Force in World War II. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Koval. And when we left and went to the break, you were talking about your multi-engine training, and then you went somewhere to be trained in B-17s?
And we started when I found out that I'm not going to be a P-38 fighter pilot like I thought I was.
And this was in Blythe, California?
Blythe, in the desert in Blythe. Actually, it was across the river, the Colorado River in Arizona, but it was called the Blythe place. And I flew for about a month. And then I was enjoying it. They gave me some sergeants to shoot at targets on the mountains. And then they gave me a day off about a month later. And I went into Blythe, and I hadn't had any chance to visit the city. So I wandered around, and I found out that they had a small flying field in Blythe, in the village. So I went there, and they had the little two-seaters with front to back. I forget what the name of it is. It's been too long. Anyway, I rented a little airplane, little top wing airplane. I forget, I think it cost $5 or $10. And I took off and I flew around, and I came back down, and the woman that was running the base said, "Oh, you're terrible. You destroyed my airplane." I said, "How did I destroy it? There it is." She says, "You did loops, rolls, and lazy eights and everything, chandelles. That airplane is not an airplane for doing acrobatics." I said, "You didn't tell me that. I didn't know." I had never flown one of them. She said, oh, you have to pay me. You have to buy the airplane. I said, I don't have any money. A second lieutenant at that time made $200 a month. I don't know whether you knew that or not.
No, I don't know that one.
Exactly $200 a month. On the end of the month, they paid you $200. Anyway, tell you what happened, she said, well, I'm going to go see the base commander there at the airfield and see if I can't get him to make you pay for the airplane. I thought, oh my goodness. Okay. So about 2 days later, the base commander called me into his office there at Blythe and said, Koval, you got into trouble flying that airplane. I said, yes, sir. He says, well, there's only one thing I can do. I said, oh my God, he's going to do something terrible, you know. He says, I'm transferring you. I said, where? Dyersburg, Tennessee. I said, wow, what's in Dyersburg? B-17s. I said, well, how's that going to solve the problem with the lady, you know, that wanted money? He says, there's a war going on. I said, yes, sir. He says, because there's a war going on, all transfers, all assignments are classified.
She won't know where you are.
He sent me to Dyersburg, Tennessee, and he couldn't tell me. It was illegal for him to tell the woman where I was. This is a war going on. Nobody should know where you are, you know. So I went to Dyersburg and I flew B-17s there for about a month, and I got into a little trouble there. They gave me 2 other airplanes to fly with me, and I went over to Reelfoot Lake, and I buzzed the lake, you know. Oh, they were mad at me. They were mad at me for buzzing a lake. The base commander was mad. Make a long story short, they said, you're a pilot. We're gonna have to do something. I said, what? They cut orders and sent me to England.
Did you fly over to England?
Yeah, in a 4-engine.
Transport of some sort?
Yeah, I don't remember what, but anyway.
Maybe a C-54.
We landed there, someplace in England. About a week later, we were on the west coast of Wales, I think it was, in England. And then they put me on a train, and I went to a village called Bury, B-U-R-Y, St. Edmunds. It's still there.
Yes, it is.
And I found myself in the 94th Bomb Group, 8th Air Force, 4th Wing, 3rd Division. Anyway, we went at it, and the first flight that I had to take, they put me as a co-pilot in a B-17, and we flew a mission to Kiel,
in Germany.
It's up on the north end in what's the name of that sea? I don't know. Anyway, I can't remember the ocean. But anyway, we came back, and that meant now that I've been on a bombing raid, that I could now go as a pilot. And from that moment on, every time I went, I was the pilot, not the co-pilot. And my squadron commander at that time, we called him Steve, Roger. And my group commander was a very famous man later on. His name was Fred Castle.
Ah, yes.
Fred Castle, they named a base after him in California, Castle Air Force Base. But at that time, he was a colonel, that's all. He wasn't anything else at that time. He was a nice fella.
How many missions did you fly?
Yes.
At least 25.
Oh, at least 25, yeah.
More than 25?
Yes.
You're going to keep me guessing. Let me see. 35. More. 40. 45. 50 missions. You flew 50 missions in B-17.
It's in the records. It's all part of history.
What was the toughest bombing raid you had to fly in those 50 missions?
The toughest?
The hardest one, the most dangerous, the one where you almost didn't make it back, possibly.
Well, I'm trying to remember. The one that I hated most was when my co-pilot got killed. His name was Glenn Gordon Grant. He was from Houston, Texas, and he got killed. But anyway, they were all difficult bombing raids. We lost airplanes all the time. I can't consider one of them worse than the others, you know. But I bombed an awful lot of cities in Europe. Yeah.
Which was worse, the flak or the fighters?
I would say the flak, because it was the flak that killed my co-pilot, yeah. The fighters initially in 1943 and early 44, before the invasion and all that, the fighters were very active. The German fighters were very active, and they did a lot of shooting down of us. The flak was also very bad, but as soon as about April, May, June of 44, just before and after the invasion, we had, what was it, F-84s, was it? Yeah.
P-51s?
P-51s, all of those airplanes over there, P-47s.
P-47s?
And P-38s,
yeah.
The one I missed. They fought there, and they protected us on our missions. And whenever we took off, they went with us across the North Sea or the Channel. But it was amusing when it first started. Wars are rather strange. When the P-51 would take off, he had tanks, gas tanks.
Extra fuel.
And so he would take off with us and follow us out there. As soon as we got over Europe, over the North Sea in Europe, you know, the German fighters would come up very quickly before we even got very far into the European area, into Germany. And as soon as they got up there, our fighters, to protect us, would drop their belly tanks and attack them. As soon as they did, the German fighters left. and we would go continue bombing, and our fighters had to go back to get gasoline. Then the Germans would come back up and attack us.
Mr. Koval, we've reached the end of our show, and I'd like to thank you for being here on Local Heroes, and thank you for your service to our country.
My pleasure.